Want to know how a 30th anniversary party falls apart before the candles are even lit? It takes one voicemail left by accident, one laugh that lands like a slap, and 3 quiet decisions I made over a single pot of tea. I'm the mother who paid for everything, and the party never happened. What time is it where you are right now? Maybe you're folding laundry with this playing in the background, or sitting in your car in a Tim Hortons lot waiting for the rain to ease off. Wherever you are, stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you isn't some made-up tale spun for the camera. This is mine. My voice, my money, my body that they decided was a problem to be managed. It was late October in Thunder Bay, the kind of afternoon where the light goes thin and gold by 4 o'clock, and you can already smell winter coming off the lake. I was at my kitchen table going over a seating chart for my son and his wife's 30th. No, I'll say it plain so you don't get lost the way some folks do with stories like this. My boy is named Owen. His wife is named Priya. The party was for their 30th wedding anniversary, a milestone I'd been quietly funding for the better part of a year. The hall, the caterer, the live trio, the photographer driving up from Toronto, all of it routed through my checking account at the credit union on May Street. My phone buzzed face down on the table. It was Priya's name on the screen. I almost let it ring out because my hands were sticky with the icing I was testing for the cake. A butter tart filling, because Owen has loved butter tarts since he was a boy, small enough to sit on the counter. But I wiped my fingers and answered. "Hi, dear," I said. Nothing, just a rustle, a clatter, the sound of a purse being set down on a hard surface. She'd pocket-dialed me. I should have hung up. My mother raised me better than to listen at doors. But then I heard another voice, one I knew too well, and my thumb froze over the screen. It was Priya's mother. We've never been close, the two of us, though I always told myself that was just the way of in-laws who come from different worlds. She has a way of speaking that's soft on top and cold underneath, like a lake in November. "Has she actually confirmed she's coming?" the woman said. "Because I told the hall we'd need to widen the aisle if she does. You can't put someone her size at the head table. It throws the whole photo off." I waited for my daughter-in-law to push back, to say something, anything. Instead, Priya laughed. A small, easy laugh, the kind you give when you want to be agreeable, when you've decided which side of the room you want to stand on. "I know," she said. "She'll eat half the buffet on her own. Honestly, maybe it's better if she sits near the kitchen. Less obvious." Then her mother again, lighter now, pleased. "Smart girl. Whatever keeps it tidy." I set the phone down on the table, screen still glowing, and I muted my end with a thumb that didn't shake the way you'd expect. The icing was still on the spatula. The kettle hadn't even clicked off yet. I remember the steam curling up against the window where the cold had started to fold the glass, and I remember thinking very calmly, so that's what they think I am. A photo problem. A buffet problem. A thing to be tucked near the kitchen so I don't ruin the picture. Let me back up, because that laugh didn't just sting. It opened something I'd kept stitched shut for a long time. I'm 63. I've been a big woman my whole adult life, and I made my peace with it somewhere around my 40th birthday, which is more than most people manage. But peace doesn't mean you forget. I grew up in a small town outside Sudbury, the daughter of a man who measured my worth in how little space I took up at the supper table. My first husband was cut from the same cloth. He didn't hit me, he just made me feel like an apology that hadn't finished saying itself. When I left him, Owen was 7, and I had 2 garbage bags of clothes and $41 to my name. I cleaned offices downtown at night and took the bus to the community college during the day, and I qualified as a dental hygienist at 34 when half my classmates were young enough to be my own kids. That's the work I did for almost 30 years. Steady hands, steady pay, and along the way, I did something I'd never told my son the full size of. I bought a little duplex near the university when the market was soft, then another, then a triplex out by the highway. I'm not rich the way television means rich. But I own 4 properties outright now, no mortgages, and the rent rolls in every month like a tide. When Owen's father passed, the small life insurance went into a GIC, and that GIC became a down payment, and that down payment became the thing that let me say yes to this anniversary party without blinking. I paid for it because I love my son. I paid for it because Priya, for all the distance between us, gave me 2 grandchildren I would walk into the lake for. I paid because I am the kind of woman who would rather give quietly than be thanked loudly. And now, here was the thanks. Sit near the kitchen, less obvious. I picked up the spatula, set it in the sink, and walked to the front room where the afternoon light was almost gone. I have a maple desk there that belonged to my second husband, a gentleman named Gus, who died of a quiet heart 4 winters ago, and who never once in 11 years made me feel like I was too much of anything. On the desk are 3 framed photos. Owen at his high school graduation, gap-toothed and proud, me in my hygienist's whites the day I got my certification, and Gus squinting into the sun on the dock at the camp we used to rent up the shore. I opened the bottom drawer and took out the leather notebook I keep my property records in, and I turned to a clean page, and I wrote 1 line: "The party is not happening." That wasn't grief, and it wasn't rage. People always think those are the only 2 things a hurt woman can feel. It was something else. It was clarity, the cold, clean kind that doesn't come often. But when it does, it settles in your chest like a stone dropped into still water. I capped my pen. My pulse, I noticed, had gone perfectly even. Because once I write a thing down in that book, it's as good as done. I made 3 calls before the sunset behind the elevators on the lakefront. The first was to the event coordinator at the hall, a young woman named Tamsin who'd been patient and kind to every change Prior's mother had demanded. The linen swapped twice, the head table moved, the bar package upgraded and then upgraded again. Tamsin answered on the 2nd ring. "It's Mrs. Holloway," I said, and I gave my real surname, the one that's on every contract and every check. "I'm the contracted payer for the anniversary booking on the 15th. "Of course, yes," she said. "Is everything? I'm cancelling the event, effective now. I'd like you to hold all vendor coordination through the hall and suspend any further charges to my card on file." I kept my voice level, the same voice I used for 30 years telling nervous patients to open a little wider. "I understand there's a cancellation window. Send me the schedule of any forfeited deposits in writing, and I'll review it tonight." There was a pause, but not the kind that argues. The kind that recognizes. "I can do that," Thompson said quietly. "Do you want me to notify the caterer and the trio directly, or will you be handling the family side?" "You handle the vendors," I said. "The family side is mine." That call took 4 minutes. 4 minutes to unwind 11 months of someone else's wishes. Paper, I've learned, moves faster than apology ever has. The 2nd call was to my lawyer. His name is Mr. Quennell, and he's the sort of man who'd rather email than speak, and rather speak than show an ounce of feeling, which is exactly why I trust him. I told him I wanted my will revisited. I'd had Owen and Prior named as joint beneficiaries on a good portion of things. The properties, the registered accounts, all of it set to pass cleanly when I'm gone. I told him I wanted that paused, not torn up in a temper. Paused, restructured into a trust with conditions, the details to be drafted, and a letter of wishes attached that I'd dictate when my head was cooler. "You're certain?" he said. Not a question, just his way of giving me a door to walk back through. "I'm certain about the pause," I said. "I'll be certain about the rest by Friday." The 3rd call was the one that cost me. It was to my granddaughter, Owen and Prior's eldest, a sharp, soft-hearted girl of 19 named Esme, who was away at school in Guelph studying to be a teacher. I'd been paying her tuition, quietly, the way I do everything, not as a bribe, not as leverage, just because I remembered what it was to be young and clever and broke, and I didn't want her cleaning offices at night the way I had. She picked up breathless, the way the young always do. "Gran, I was just thinking about you. "Sweetheart," I said, and my voice caught for the first time all afternoon, just once, like a stitch dropped. "I need you to know something, and I need you to hear it from me before you hear it twisted by anyone else." And I told her. Not all of it. Not the cruelty word for word, because she didn't need those exact knives in her ears. But I told her the party was cancelled, and that I'd be changing some things, and that none of it, not $1, not one decision, was a punishment aimed at her. "Your tuition is safe," I said. "That was never on the table, and it never will be. You hear me? You finish your degree. That promise is between you and me, and it doesn't depend on anybody else behaving." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a small voice that told me she'd seen more in that house than I'd let myself imagine, "Gran, did Mom say something about you?" I closed my eyes. "Some people," I said carefully, "spend so long worrying about how things look that they forget how things are. Your mother loves you. That part's true. The rest will sort out in time." I didn't tell her what I'd heard. "I'm telling you because you're a stranger, and strangers are safe." But I wouldn't put that weight on a 19-year-old's back. Some loyalties you protect even from the truth. When I hung up, the kitchen was dark and the kettle had long gone cold. I made a fresh pot, sat down at the table where it had all started, and I waited. It didn't take long. Owen called first the next morning, his voice high and frayed. "Mom, the hall just emailed Priya saying it's cancelled. There's some mix-up. The caterer's confused. What on earth is going on?" I held the phone with both hands and looked out at the frost on the back fence. "There's no mix-up, son," I said. "I cancelled it. I cancelled it." A silence. "Then why would you do that?" "Mom, people have booked time off. Priya's mother's flying her sister in from Calgary. This is humiliating. Humiliating." I let the words sit there in the air between us. "Owen," I said, "do you know where your wife and her mother decided I should sit at your anniversary?" "What? No, what does that? Near the kitchen." "So I'd be less obvious. So I wouldn't, and I want you to hear this exactly the way I heard it, throw off the photo." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Your wife laughed and said I'd eat half the buffet on my own. I heard it because Priya pocket-dialed me and the line stayed open. I wasn't listening at a door, son. The door was wide open and they didn't know I was standing in it. The silence this time was different. It had a flaw falling out of it. She wouldn't," he started and then stopped, because somewhere in him he knew she would, knew she had. I think a part of him had heard that same soft cruelty aimed at others for years and had taught himself not to hear it. "I'm not asking you to take sides between your wife and your mother," I told him, and I meant it. "I raised you to be loyal to the woman you married, and I won't undo that. But I will not pay tens of thousands of dollars to be seated by the dish pit at a party celebrating a love I bankrolled. I have some dignity left, Owen. I bought it the hard way, and I'm not spending it to keep a photo tidy." He didn't have an answer. There isn't one. The days after were strange and loud, and then slowly quiet. Priya's mother sent a long message. I'll spare you the whole thing, full of phrases like family unity and water under the bridge, and surely we can be adults. Never once the word sorry. Never once my name without a softening adjective in front of it. I read it twice, and then I did something that surprised even me. I didn't reply with anger. I replied with 2 short paragraphs. The first was a boundary, plain and final. I would not be discussing my body, my weight, or my appearance with her, then or ever, and any future contact built on those subjects would simply go unanswered. The second was an itemized note of the deposits her endless changes had forfeited, the twice-swapped linens, the moved head table, the upgraded bar, totaling a number that wasn't ruinous but was exact. I didn't demand she pay it. I just wanted her to see it written down, the cost of treating my generosity like it was owed. She never replied to that. Some people only know how to talk when they think they hold the checkbook. Priya came to the house alone about 10 days later. I almost didn't open the door, but I'm a grandmother, and grandmothers leave doors open longer than they should. She stood on my porch in the cold with her hands jammed in her coat pockets, and she'd been crying, you could see it, the puffy under eyes she'd tried to powder over. I didn't know the line was open, she said, as if that were the wound. As if the cruelty only counted because I'd caught it. I know you didn't, I said. That's the point, dear. You didn't think I'd hear it, so you let yourself say it. That's not a slip. That's what was already there. She started to cry properly then, and I'll be honest with you, some part of me, the soft part that has loved this woman as my son's wife for 3 decades, wanted to pull her inside and put the kettle on and tell her it was all right. But it wasn't all right, and the kindest thing I could do, for both of us, was not pretend it was. I've been letting my mother run me my whole life, she said. I go along. It's easier. I didn't mean you did mean it in the moment, I said gently, because gentleness and honesty can live in the same breath. And I think you're starting to mean something different now. Those are 2 true things. I'm not going to scold you, Priya. You're a grown woman, not one of my grandkids. But I'm going to tell you what I'm doing, so you don't hear it from a lawyer's letter. And I told her about the trust, that the inheritance she and Owen had been counting on, and I knew they'd been counting on it, I'm not a fool, was now structured with conditions, time, and a letter of wishes. That I wasn't disowning my son, that I was simply no longer going to hand my life's work to a household that had decided I was an embarrassment to be hidden. What conditions? She asked, very quiet. I thought about this for 3 nights. That you do the work, I said. Therapy, if you'll have it. Yours, not couples. The kind where you figure out why you've spent 50 years making yourself small to keep your mother large. And that's not a punishment, Priya. That's the most loving thing I can think to require of you, because I've watched my granddaughters start to learn that same shrinking from you, and I will burn every dollar I own before I let that get passed down another generation. She put her hand over her mouth. I think it was the first time anyone had named the thing out loud. I didn't fix her that afternoon. That's not how it works, and I want to be honest with you, because the tidy endings are usually lies. She didn't transform on my porch into a different woman, but she nodded and she said she'd think about the therapy, and a week later she texted me a photo of an appointment card. Just the card, no caption, and I texted back a single heart and nothing else. Some conversations are better when they're mostly silence. The anniversary date came and went with no party. Owen took Priya for a quiet dinner, just the 2 of them, and he called me that night, and we talked for the first time like 2 adults instead of a mother, and the boy she'd protected too long. He apologized. Not for his wife, that wasn't his to give, but for himself, for the years he taught himself not to hear. I should have stood in that doorway with you a long time ago, Mom, he said, and I let myself cry then, quietly, with the phone pressed to my ear in the dark. There's more, but I'll tell it fast, because the loud part is over and the rest is just a life rearranging itself into a better shape. I did finish the trust with Mr. Quennell. The letter of wishes I attached says, in my own words near the end, that I chose them the day they chose themselves. And I chose them anyway, all along, even when they hadn't. I set aside a fund too, separate from all of it, restricted to one thing, bursaries for mature students at the community college I'd attended, the ones over 40 coming back to school with kids at home, and $41 to their name. I named it after my mother, who never got the chance. The application asks only one question I insisted on. What did you have to stop apologizing for to get here? Esme finished her year with honors and came home for the summer and slept in her old room, and one evening she sat with me on the back step while the light did its long, slow northern Ontario fade over the lake, and she said out of nowhere, "Gran, Were you ever scared they wouldn't love you if you took up too much room? I thought about my father at the supper table. My first husband and his apologies that never finished. The aisle they wanted widened so I wouldn't ruin a photograph. Every day of my life until about a year ago, I told her. And then I decided I'd rather be loved whole or not at all. It's a good rule. You can have it for free. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we didn't say anything else. And the loons called out somewhere across the water, the way they do at dusk, lonely and unbothered, all at once. They thought there was no seat for me. They wanted me tucked away by the kitchen so the picture would come out clean. But I owned the house the picture would have been taken in, and 3 more besides, and a life I built with my own 2 steady hands. So I'll tell you where I sit now. I sit at the head of my own table, in the middle of my own light, taking up exactly as much room as a woman who survived all of that has every right to take. And there is a seat for anyone who wants to join me, but only if they come ready to see me, the whole of me, and call it good. The seat by the kitchen was never really about a chair. It was about how long I'd let other people decide how much room I was allowed to take. I sat at that maple desk with the 3 photographs, and I finally understood something simple. Every cruelty in that house had grown in the soil of my own silence. I'd paid for the hall, the trio, the caterer, the tuition, and I told myself that giving quietly was the same as being respected. It wasn't. Priya's mother widened an aisle in her mind for years, and Priya learned to laugh along, because no one had ever shown them there'd be a cost. Quiet generosity, I learned the hard way, can teach the people you love that you'll absorb anything. The kindest thing I ever did for them was finally let there be a consequence. What turned that pocket dial call into something other than a wound was that I didn't reach for the loudest weapon. I reached for the steadiest one. I'd spent 30 years with steady hands cleaning teeth, and the same steadiness let me make 3 calls instead of 3 threats. There's a kind of clear thinking that only shows up after the heat passes, and if you can wait for it, if you can sit with a cold pot of tea until your pulse evens out, it will tell you exactly what to do. I didn't burn anything down. I restructured it. I paused a will instead of tearing one up. I sent an itemized note instead of a screaming match. Doing the smart thing instead of the satisfying thing is what let me keep my dignity and still protect my granddaughter from learning to shrink. And none of it would have held if I hadn't been willing to sit in the discomfort. Loving Owen meant telling him the truth about the boy he taught himself not to hear. Loving Priya meant not pulling her inside and pretending it was fine, because the easy comfort would have cost her the chance to actually change. The hardest thing I asked of her wasn't money, it was the work. Therapy. Looking at why she'd made herself small to keep her mother large. I asked it because I'd done my own version of that work at 40, and I knew it was the only door out. So if you take anything from a 63-year-old woman who got hidden by the dish pit and decided not to stay there, let it be this. Be decent enough to give without keeping score, but be wise enough to notice when your giving has trained someone to mistake you for furniture. And when that day comes, you'll need more than anger. You'll need the patience to act clean instead of cruel, and the backbone to mean it. I chose them the day they chose themselves, but I also chose myself first, finally, and that's the part I've been missing my whole life. There's a seat at the head of my own table now. I'm sitting in it,